I don't think I need to reintroduce Aaron because we've already heard from him, but I would like him to come up here and take the stage and get us cranking and started again. You ready?
I'm ready.
Excellent. Welcome, Aaron Beverly.
And Karen, I just have to say, I have never had anyone hype me up as well as she has. She is incredible. That is a talent. Thank you so much. Let's give her a hand. She did raise her hand for extrovert. I did see that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this presentation is going to be a little bit different from the keynote. I wanted the keynote to be more formal. It was just me speaking, but now I'm going to practice some of that, what I said was an introverted tendency that I like to avoid, and I'm going to have you interact with me as well. You're going to ask some questions. I'm going to give you my process, but I really want this to be a learning experience for you. So I'm going to go through my process, hopefully relatively quickly, and then I will open it up for the audience for questions about the process or anything that you may want me to touch on when it comes to crafting your speech. And for those of you who are joining via Zoom, you should be able to utilize the chat. And once we have addressed some of the questions in the room, we'll try to then navigate to the chat. And anyone who has a question will have someone read off those questions that you type in to the chat. All right. So the process, Aaron's step-by-step guide to craft and refine your speech. We talked about my speech in 2016, and that's when I really started to develop a process. What does it mean for me to prepare my speeches? How do I like to give my speeches? How do I like to prepare them? I'm a person who really likes to take a hands-on approach end to end. I am not a person who likes to do things on the fly. I like to plan, I like to be organized, I like to know exactly what's going to happen, or at least try my best to know exactly what's going to happen. Now, all that to say, this is my process. However, I always tell people, there is no such thing as the way. There is only a way. It is up to you to find your way. What we're going to go through here is what was my way in 2016, and then 2017, 2018, 2019, and etc. So when it comes to the process, there are about, I can't remember how many steps are in my process, 10 or 12, one or the other. But number one is very key, and I call it the golden rule. It's one that I'm sure we've all seen at some point in our Toastmaster lives or just in general. That is KYA. Who wants to tell me what KYA means? Yes. Know your audience. You can completely bomb a speech before you even say a word to your audience because you did not prepare that content for them. Just a really quick story. When I was working at JP Morgan, there was one manager that I was preparing a presentation for. Now, when I started giving him the presentation, the meeting was scheduled for an hour. However, I thought in my mind, I know what this guy wants. I am going to just give it to him and just give him all of this super detailed information. I'm going to give him a spreadsheet. And I pull that in front of him. He stops me 1 minute into the presentation and says, "What the hell is this?" And there are 59 minutes left in this meeting that we got to have back because he told us to go back to the drawing board and come back with something that was tailored to him. And that was a great learning moment for me about KYA. You can assume that you know what your audience wants, but there are certain things that you can do to learn exactly what they want. What's a simple way that you can know what your audience wants? Anybody want to just take a guess? Ask them. Literally ask them, what is it that they want to see? What details do they want to hear about? How do they want to see the information? Are they a PowerPoint person or are they a spreadsheet person? There are some people who do want to see those granular details. However, there are other people, especially I've learned at the higher executive levels, they don't necessarily want to see all of the granular details. They would rather have a high-level explainer. You get to know all of this by knowing your audience. Different ways you can know your audience as well. If you don't have access to the person or the demographic or the people who you're going to be speaking to, you can ask those who have presented to them in the past. If you are speaking at a conference or some organized event, ask the organizers what the demographic is going to be. Who's going to be in that audience? Are they going to be on the younger side? Are they going to be on the older side? Are they going to be at the beginning of their career, middle, end of their career? What is the expertise of the demographic? You can find out all of that information from your organizers. However, once we get past the golden rule, what I do after that is I start to brainstorm what topic I want to speak about. And this is really the fun part because this is where I just get to have a mind dump. And I just get to put out all of the ideas that I have. And what I try to do after that, after I put out all of this information, it's finally time to start tailoring it and trying to formalize exactly how I need to put this information together. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where we get to this step. I call it detox. DTOKS. Now, if you've heard other champions, this is going to be something that you may be familiar with, but I tweaked mine a little bit just because I like the way that the acronym sounds. So, what do you want your audience to do, think, or know by the time you are done giving this speech? What do you want the audience to do, think, or know by the time you are done giving the speech? I call it my do, think, or know summary, or detox for short. Now, you may think that, okay, this is a really easy step. However, with detox, you want to do this in 10 words or less. What do you want the audience to do, think, or know? 10 words or less. And what this does, after my brainstorming session, where I just put out all of the information that I could possibly put, I start to understand, okay, if I want my audience to do something specific, what information did I put down in that brainstorming session that is going to achieve that goal? Now, another way that we can look at detox is the order is important. Doing, in my eyes, is the most important action. It's the strongest action when you want your audience to actually do something at the end of the presentation. You can tailor your presentation to meet that goal. Now, maybe you want them to think differently than how they thought before. So what ways do you have to present your information to get them thinking from one position to another position? Thinking is the second most critical. Now, knowing is very important, but just by show of hands, have you ever received an email that just says FYI? Yeah. What does that mean? For your information. We don't need you to do anything with this information. We don't need you to think differently. We just want you to be in the know so that it's not a surprise. And a lot of times when I see those FYIs, I'll admit, I just throw away the email, like, okay, I don't need to do anything. But knowing is important, but it's not the most important. Now, the last thing that I'll say about detox is you can approach it another way where, okay, if I want my audience to do something, what do I have to get them to think? Okay, in order for them to think that, what do I need them to know? So, obviously, nobody can do anything, nobody can think differently if they don't know some critical piece of information. So just some different ways that you can think about detox. But remember that key, 10 words or less. And that's going to help you with the refinement process. Now, for me, I like to write out a script. For all of my presentations, for all of the speeches that I've ever given in the International Speech Contest, I wrote out every single word. And this was beneficial for me because I'm a person who likes to write it out. We saw in the introvert presentation earlier that some people like to write everything out. I'm one of those people. And if you're not a person who likes to write everything out, that's perfectly fine. A lot of people are perfectly fine with just writing an outline. Some people tell me that they're good at just talking off the top of their head, and then when they get on stage, I see like, I don't know. That's probably just what you think, but you probably could help a little bit by just at least writing an outline. But I like to write everything out. Now, a lot of people don't like the writing process because it can be tedious. So one of the things that I will do, just going back to that brainstorming step a little bit, one of the things that has been invaluable for me as a speaker and as a speechwriter is utilizing a story file, or I expand that to a content file. If I probably could share, but I'm not sure if anything that would pop up that would be not suitable for audiences in terms of language that I may use for some of my journaling. But in my journal, I will have what I call a content file. So in that content file, I'm listing out stories, I'm listing out quotes, I'm listing out any special links to articles that I may have found, and I'm just assembling this over time, and it's just getting larger and larger of any stories that I may have or any quotes that I think could be useful in the presentation. So this is helpful for me in writing because it is much harder for me to start with a blank page. I don't like starting with a blank page. I am a much better editor than I am a from scratch writer. Does that make sense? So it's something that you can use when you have something that you're trying to jot down, but you just can't find a way to put words on that blank page. Go to your story file. If you keep it digitally, you can copy and paste, or if you write it out physically in a journal, go to that journal and just start to write out a piece that's specific to the presentation that you're creating. Just another way to kickstart the creation process in a little bit of an easier way than just starting from scratch. So after I write out my script, this is going to be a rough draft. A lot of people have this notion in their minds that when they write a speech, that it must already win the World Championship of Public Speaking. I'm here to tell you that I'm fairly confident 99.9% of the time that does not happen. There will need to be iterations of the speech. There will need to be iterations of the presentation, the content that's within it, etc. So don't put so much pressure on yourself to have that first draft be a home run. It's more likely than not going to be pretty bad. But the thing is, with this process, we're refining it to make it better. Now, this next step, audio, record yourself reading the script. Now, I didn't establish the rules earlier before, but ladies and gentlemen, that audience participation is going to continue. Now, just by show of hands, how many of you like the sound of your voice? Literally, I just saw 2 hands tentatively go up and then immediately go back down. Now, audience participation. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to take out your phones. And now some of you who have your phones on the table, like, oh, why did I have my phone on the table? Take out your phones, and I want you to find your voice recorder. Now, once you find your voice recorder, I'm going to count to 3, and I'm going to have you talk into your phones. Just talk about what you've done in the day, or talk about why you're so awesome, or why you live such a fabulous life. I don't care what you talk about. I just want you to talk into your phone. So, everybody who's going to participate, ready? Because I know that there are some people who said, no, I'm not doing this. On a count of 3, you can start talking. 1, 2, 3.
Learn how to share slides in a very synopsis base. And
Okay, you can pause your recording. Now, the reason why some people do not participate in this activity, the reason why some people do not like this step is because they know that step 6 is right around the corner. What do we think step 6 is? Listen to the recording. Okay, before we start, ladies and gentlemen, let's make this fun. I want you to take your phones. I want you to turn the volume all the way up. Turn the volume all the way up. Come on. And then, on the count of 3, we're all going to press play at the same time. 1, 2, 2.5, 3. Okay, you can stop. You can stop. I'll stop the pain. Now, referencing my 2016 speech, be honest. You enjoyed that, didn't you? Like, no, not so much this time, Aaron, no. Now, again, show of hands. How many of you like the sound of your voice? Actually, a few more people raised their hand this time. That's okay, pretty good. That's progress. But ladies and gentlemen, there's a reason, a scientific reason, why we don't like the sound of our voice. And the reason has everything to do with what is called conduction. You have 2 main types of conduction with how we hear sounds. You have air conduction and you have bone conduction. Now, air conduction is how you are hearing me right now. My voice is flying through the air and those sound waves are reaching your ear through the air. Higher tones typically travel best through air conduction. But the other one is bone conduction. This is how we hear ourselves typically. And this is where the sound waves, the vibrations are going through the bones in our ear, and that's how the sound waves are reaching our ear in that way. Now, lower frequencies travel best through bone conduction. Now, what happens is that when we hear ourselves talking, like, oh, I sound good. I hear a little bit of the bass. Me, I thought I sounded like Barry White. And then I heard myself on a recording, and I said, ooh, that's not Barry White. I was thinking, oh, what's going on? What happened? Now, when it comes to that, I just want you to know, a lot of people don't like the sound of their voice because it sounds different. And that's all it is. It sounds different than how you're used to hearing your voice. It's not bad, it's just different. So if you ever have any reservations about recording yourself and listening to your recording, I want you to remember this. Everyone, please stand up. Take your index finger, point it to your chest. Now repeat after me. This is my voice.
this is my voice.
This is my recording.
This is my recording.
This is how I sound.
This is how I sound.
Deal with it. You may have a seat. And the reason why I say this is because listening to yourself is one of the best ways to critique your own speech or presentation. You're listening to the mistakes that you make. You're listening to any of those ums or ahs that you may throw into your speech unknowingly. And it's one way for you to become your own best evaluator. And you don't get that benefit unless you record and listen. Now, when I have listened to my speech as much as I can, I've tried to tweak it over and over again, which is the next step: rewrite, record, re-listen, repeat. So I'm going to keep doing these steps number 4, 5, and 6 over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm going to tweak my speech every single time that I hear something. If I hear a different way that I could have given a certain line, I'm going to give that line a different way. And if it sounds good to me, that's great. I can lock it in at that time. Now, when I've gotten to a point where I can't find any more improvement, to me, that is my sign that it is time to take it to a live audience. And step number 8, tape in front of a live studio audience and watch it. Now, I'm not going to have you record yourself and watch it, so if you had that fear, be at ease. But this is equally important, if not more important, because now, in addition to hearing yourself speak, you're going to see what you're doing as you're speaking. So maybe you're a person that likes to put their hands in their pocket. Maybe you're a person that likes to pace back and forth. Maybe you're a person who just likes to over-gesticulate. You'll get to see all of that. But in addition, if you are, for instance, trying to incorporate humor into your speech, there are different ways that we can evoke humor. We can do it through what we say, but we also do it through visuals. So if I hear somebody laugh, what are the facial expressions that I'm making that cause people to laugh? Was it something unusual that I did? What was my body doing at that point? That's where I'm really starting to become a scientist, and I'm going to try to play with that. So if I see something that worked for one audience, I'm going to try to mimic that for a completely different audience. If I get the same result with those same actions, then I'm going to lock that in, or at least take it to the next stage. If I think that a piece of humor is funny, but for whatever reason my body isn't conveying that humor, I'm going to continually test that until I can get the result that I want. Now, if I get to a point where I've done it time and time again, and I've tried every single facial expression, I've tried every single exaggerated body movement to try to evoke that laughter, it's time to finally understand that it's not funny. Sometimes it's harder to reach that conclusion than you may think. But then, step number 9 is to apply feedback with caution. Now, I'm going to speak plainly right now. I love Toastmasters. Toastmasters is a great organization, and overall, Toastmasters is built on giving feedback so that you can try to take your communication skills to the next level. However, Toastmasters love giving feedback. Sometimes that feedback isn't necessarily good all the time. So you have to apply what I call feedback filters. Because sometimes feedback isn't necessarily for you, and sometimes it may be for you, but just not at that time. For instance, one of the feedback filters that I apply is time. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, I don't like feedback. I don't like feedback at all. Because when I create a speech, I view my speech as my children. And how dare you tell me that my children are not perfect in every single way? Sorry, I got a little bit emotional there. But that's just the emotion speaking. That's me being proud. And what I will do when I hear feedback, I'm not going to apply that immediately. I'm going to allow some time to pass so that I can take the emotion out of it on a later day and try to think about the feedback more objectively. I'll give you a behind-the-scenes example. In 2019, I was practicing my final speech. And in that final speech, I had something very similar in terms of a title that I had in 2016. And the feedback that I received was, Aaron, you've already done this. People would be expecting this. Don't do the same thing that you did in 2016. Now, when I first heard that feedback, I thought, what do you know? I did this in 2016 and it worked great. But again, that was the emotion speaking. I allowed time to pass, and as I started thinking about it more objectively, I started thinking, you know what? She's right. I need to change that title. And all of the words that I had in the title before just got condensed into an unbelievable story. So sometimes time is your best friend. But another feedback filter that I apply is just my own understanding. I want to pass this on to everybody. Do not apply feedback that you do not understand. Do not apply feedback that you do not understand. And sometimes you may not understand simply because you need more time to pass, you need more experience. There are times where I received feedback years ago that I didn't think about rationally until later years because I wasn't yet ready for the lesson. Sometimes you're not ready for the lesson, and you need to allow that time and experience to build up before you can understand what it is that that person who gave you the feedback was trying to say. Now, my favorite feedback filter is what I call my circle of counsel. Now, the circle of counsel is just a small group of people who I trust who will give me feedback on my presentation. Now, when I am creating a speech, I consider myself the judge, the jury, and if need be, the executioner of my presentation. Everyone else is just a lawyer trying to argue their case. However, my circle of counsel is a little bit different. I give them almost as much power as myself. So if they give me a piece of feedback, then I start to look at that piece of feedback a little bit differently than if a stranger just gave me that feedback. Now, with your circle of counsel, they have to be people that you trust. And they don't necessarily all have to have the same expertise or the same role in your circle of counsel. In 2019 and in 2016 before that, I had only 3 people in my circle of counsel. Actually, sorry, 4 people in my circle of counsel. So, one was my mentor and coach, Dilip Abesekera. Dilip Abesekera was the 2005-2006 international president. He was the person that introduced me to Toastmasters, and he was my first coach and mentor. So his role was to teach me or tell me if my fundamentals were still strong. That was his role. Now, 2 other people in my circle of counsel were my mother and my sister. And while they're good public speakers in some respects, they're not as skilled as Dilip. So their role is not going to be the same as Dilip's to give me feedback about my speech. Their role was to make sure that I'm being authentic. So the Aaron Beverly that I am on the stage, I want to make sure that that's the Aaron Beverly that they see in some respects. Like, yes, this is still a little bit more of a polished version of Aaron Beverly. I was talking to someone just shortly ago saying that when I'm on stage, I typically give myself more permission to be myself. And I just have to tweak things a little bit to be a little bit more clean in language and things like that. But I want to make sure that I'm still Aaron Beverly. And who else can tell me that better than my mother and sister who love me dearly, and I love them dearly. Now, the 4th person that I had in my circle of counsel, specifically in 2019, we met him a little bit earlier in the presentation, Daniel Midson Short. He was my accountability buddy throughout 2019. We started chatting and started talking about different concepts of public speaking. And while I didn't go over in detail my speech with him, we would always go over the concepts. We would always go over the theories about how to engage an audience in a certain way or what certain lines to use and what not to use. And it was great because our goal was to let's get on the world stage together, which is exactly what we did in 2019. So those are just some of the feedback filters that I apply, and we can go into more if there are additional questions about that. But, and I did clarify with myself now, just given the space, it's not 12 steps, it is 10. And step 10 is set a cutoff date for editing. Now, we heard Karen say that before that one of her regrets in competing the last time she was in the contest was not tweaking her speech between the semifinals of the district and the district finals. And I agree that you should always tweak and refine and make it better every round. One of my goals in 2019, I wanted to improve something every single round. Whether that was in the first round, just remembering my speech, and then in the area, I wanted to make sure that my body conveyed the message that I was saying out of my mouth. So these were different things that I had as goals. and I would constantly tweak the speech. However, before showtime, there is a certain point where you have to say enough is enough. I am not editing it anymore. And there's a danger to editing on the spot. Because if you're a person like me and you practice over and over and over again, if you're practicing at the last second, what do you think can happen when you're giving your final presentation? You get it mixed up. You start talking about a previous version, and then you're saying, oh, wait, no, I didn't mean that. Let me go into this. And now all of a sudden you're in your head instead of being where you need to be, which is present in the moment, talking to your audience. So in 2019, I stopped editing my speech 2 weeks before the convention even started. And there were some previous world champions during the convention. They came up to me and said, oh, Aaron, do you want to run your speech by me? And I said, nope. Because I knew that if I gave my speech in front of them and I saw their reactions, I was going to try to tweak that speech. So knowing myself, I said, I'm just going to go with what I have. I have refined this speech over time. I have gone through this process. I trust my process, and I want to see if my process can get me all the way through, which it did. Spoiler. But with this, if you go through this process, one of the things that is really critical is that going through all these steps, you should have a quality audio recording of your presentation. You should have a quality video of your presentation. And practice, for me, is all about just internalizing, not necessarily just trying to reiterate over and over and over again. So for my speech in 2019 and even in 2016, with those audio recordings, I would listen to the speech over and over and over again. And I internalized that speech how I internalized my favorite song. Show of hands, how many of you have a song that is just stuck in your head no matter how many years go by? Yep, you know every single word to this song, despite it being, you haven't heard it in decades, but because you listen to it over and over and over again at some point, you just have it. That's the same for my speeches. I listen to it over and over and over again, and that is how I memorized my speech, or internalized, as I like to say. So all of that is my process. And now what we're going to do, if we have a runner for the microphone, I'm going to take some questions, and we'll start in the room, and then after a few questions in the room, we'll see if there's anything on the chat. So yes, we have one question here.
Thank you, Aaron. This was great revisiting it after so many years. So recently I did a AI presentation, and it was on fundamentals of AI. And this was in preparation for something which is coming. And at the end, I got several testimonials, and almost 30% of the audience said that even though it was a fundamentals AI presentation, it scared them. And my intent wasn't that, right? So Detox, I wanted them to get excited, but they got scared. How do you anticipate something like that? How do you prepare for that? Or
Well, for that, sometimes the audience will give you the answer. And sometimes you can have as many assumptions as you want, but similar to how my manager in the beginning of my presentation told me to just stop, that's not what he wanted. So it's a little bit different for you because you probably thought about your audience. You thought that this would be something that was good for them. You probably even received feedback saying that, yeah, this is something that would be useful for us, but it didn't give the same it wasn't the emotional intent that you have. So when you do that, you have to take the feedback from the audience. And this is actually another one of my feedback filters. So I will have something that I call a bothers me list. And in my presentation, I'll list anything that bothers me. So if somebody gives me one piece of feedback, all of a sudden that's going to be in my head and it's going to bother me. So I'll start writing it out in my bothers me list. Now, alone, that bothers me list, it doesn't matter. Like if I have something that just bothers me, or just one person came up to me and now it bothers me, okay, fine. However, after it reaches my bothers me list, if another person, even if it's one other person, comes up and gives me that similar feedback, that's my sign that I need to tweak something in the speech to change it up so that it doesn't do the negative side of what it was doing and starts doing something that I had more of, that I intended to do. Make sense?
So you're saying set your own parameters, if it crosses that, then change them.
Yep, exactly. And again, listen to the feedback of your audience. If you're getting similar feedback from multiple people, that's another feedback filter. Like if one person just gives me one piece of feedback, okay. If 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 give me that feedback, or in your case you said 30%, like, okay, that's something I need to address. Yes, in front, and then I see one hand in the middle there.
Hi, Aaron. Did you get coached by another world champion? And what was his feedback if you did?
So I didn't get coached by a previous world champion. In 2016, what I did do, I hunted down Ed Tate. I had bought one of his products in the past, and it had a free 1 hour coaching session with him as part of it. I bought that in 2013. I held on to it for 3 years. And then in the finals for 2016, he was coaching Darren Tay. And I came up to him and I said, hey, can you look at my speech? However, it wasn't a coaching in terms of, he just listened to the speech and just thought it was good. He just gave me some more general tips because his mindset was the same as mine now, where you're at such a stage that it doesn't make sense to tweak this speech. So I'm just going to give you something general, and then we'll move on. But that was the closest that I got to coaching. Dilip really has been the only coach and mentor that I had formally. I took his teachings from 2013 and then just ran with it afterwards. So the rest of it was just kind of me. I saw one, yeah.
Thank you, Aaron. I wonder if you might share some insights when you're in the delivery phase of your speech, how you create memory anchors so that you got the richness of what you've written out, and how you chunk the information in your delivery.
Sorry, can you say that one more time? This is the first time in a long time I've actually had to think hard about the question.
So I'm curious to learn some insights into the delivery phase of your speech.
Yeah.
How you create memory anchors so that you cover all of the richness of what you've written out without losing the nuances.
Right.
And also how you chunk your delivery so that you don't lose the audience.
So I don't necessarily think it's specifically in the delivery phase, although the delivery phase is where I start testing out the theories that I worked on behind the scenes. So what I try to focus on first is the content. Like, do I have that richness as you referred to? Do I have that level of depth that I want? Also, I try to test out, do I have the humorous pieces that I want? And then it's time to, okay, take it out of the laboratory. It's time to test it in the field. Now, when I feel like I have that depth, I have that richness, what I then will try to do is try to just use some of those various tips and tricks that we have in public speaking to make it more memorable. So in 2016, one of the most memorable things was the long title. That was more of the theatrical piece that made it more memorable. But on top of the theatrics, there has to be a point, there has to be a meaning behind it. So that whole long title would have meant absolutely nothing if I didn't give that statement later saying that just because you say more doesn't mean people will remember what you say. So for me, I start with the content, and then I try to add the bells and whistles to make it more memorable. And there are dozens of ways that you can make it more memorable. Like you have mnemonic devices, you have so many other things that you can utilize, and I just take those techniques and just try to plug them in, see if they work. And again, it's kind of just being a scientist and doing things in the laboratory and then taking it out to the field to see if it works. So hopefully that addresses part of your question. It's not necessarily just in the delivery phase. I do it more in the background, and just the delivery phase is where I test out the theory.
I kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you said use memory anchors, I took your question to mean, like, how do you anchor, like, how does Aaron help himself to remember certain parts of his speech?
Oh, my apologies.
Not necessarily, how you make it more memorable for the audience, but what do you use as anchors to help you remember?
My apologies. Yeah, I didn't. I took it in another direction. So when it comes to memorizing it for myself, it really is in that last part that I talked about in the process where I have that video recording, I have that audio recording, and I'm just watching it and listening to it. That's really how I internalize and memorize. There are definitely other ways that you can do it. Like I know some people, they have specific spots on the stage, and when they step in that specific spot, that represents this certain section of their speech. And they know once they hit this spot, okay, that's the part of the speech that I have to give. I believe that's something that Darren Tay in 2016 had been coached with by Ed Tate, where, okay, if I step in this spot, it's time for this part of the speech. If I step in this spot, it's this part of the speech. So we'll take a couple more in the room, and then I want to see what we have in the chat. Yes.
If you were preparing for the international speech contest, what goes through your mind to say, what topic should I pick that is going to have an impact?
Yeah. So it's challenging sometimes because when you enter a contest, I'll, again, say it plainly that very few people enter the contest saying, oh boy, I can't wait to lose in the first round. No, you want to win. You want to try your best to win. You want to try your best to get to the next round. Of course, the purpose of the contest is to showcase the skills that you've learned in Toastmasters. That's the primary goal of the contest. But when it comes to trying to find that certain topic, I think that's not necessarily the right way to approach it. For me, it's always about what message do I really want to give to my audience? Or alternatively, if you're more of a fundamentalist, what aspect of public speaking do I want to practice this year? And what speech can I give that will help me practice that? It's starting in 2017, I started asking myself those two questions. And if I said no to one of those questions, I had to really consider if I was going to compete. But if I could answer yes to at least one of them, I would just compete. If I could answer yes to both of them, it was just yep, it's a lock, I'm competing. So yeah, it's not necessarily finding a certain topic that you think will win. It's about giving the message that you really want to give to the audience and seeing if that resonates with them to get to later rounds. And I saw one question in the back, and then we'll go to, yes.
If the feedback I receive does not fit my personal style,
Ooh.
so
Yes.
which one should I do?
Now, to that, I would say that if it's understandable, try it. So again, if you don't understand the feedback, I would still stand on do not apply that feedback because it may be such a non-fit for you that it just doesn't resonate. You can't understand how to incorporate that feedback. However, if it is understandable, I would say at least try it. In 2014, I decided people were telling me that I needed to be more dynamic on the stage. It was more of a general comment. So, okay, I said I'll try to evoke some of the more dynamic speakers that I knew of, like the Tony Robbins, some people that have high levels of energy, that are always in the passion plane. They're always speaking up here with their hands and trying to evoke energy from the crowd and yelling. That's not my style, but I understood it enough to say, okay, I'll try it. And it works fairly well. I got up to the semifinals in 2014, but it didn't really fit me. And one of the world champions, Randy Harvey, came up to me after my district contest and told me that, yes, it's great, we hear all of the theatrics, but I don't hear you. I don't hear that part of you. So it really allowed me to test it out, but if I understood that it wasn't for me, I just put it to the side. So I would say test it, but if it still doesn't fit, if it really conflicts with your style, then see what you can tweak to make it more of your style, or if it really doesn't fit, then it's just probably not useful feedback for you. All right, so let's go to the chat for a couple of questions, if they are available, and then we'll return to the room.
Yeah, I just got one. Aaron, what are you aiming to do with your public speaking skills in the future?
That is a good question, and it changes every day. So the pandemic years, it kind of changed my perspective of public speaking a bit, and to the point where I really stopped enjoying public speaking. where as an introvert, I thought, okay, yeah, I can sit in the comfort of my own home. I can give speeches and then I'm done. I'm home. I can take a nap. It'll be great. But as I was giving the speeches virtually, it was just tedious. It wasn't engaging. I didn't get that same adrenaline rush like I'm getting now and facing this audience. Like some people get an adrenaline rush jumping out of a plane, mountain climbing. I get an adrenaline rush by talking in front of a group of people in person. So I started to fall out of love with public speaking in general because it wasn't the public speaking that I fell in love with before. And I'm trying to get back to that. Now, since then, I've switched careers, I've switched companies, and I'm getting to a point now, do I really want to stick in the banking and finance sector, or do I want to find more opportunities to be a facilitator? And that's where I'm kind of juggling right now, where I love what the finance and banking industry pays me, but where do I really find my joy? And the answer is becoming that it's in facilitation, it's in public speaking, live in person, and that's kind of where I'm currently at. So it's probably not a direct answer to your question, but all that to say, I'm still trying to figure it out and fall back in love with public speaking.
We have another one
Okay.
from online. She says, thanks, Aaron. How would you recommend one approaches introducing humor in one's speech?
Ooh.
How much, how often, using gestures or stories?
So again, I try to take a scientist approach to it where I think something is funny. I want to see if other people think it's funny. So if I have a conversation and people laugh, okay, in my mind, I'm taking a mental note. Okay, they laughed at that. I'm going to try to test that in front of a larger audience. And sometimes it works with a larger audience, sometimes it doesn't. But everyday conversations that you have, you're more humorous than you give yourself credit for, I feel. So if you have a passing conversation and you're saying something to one person and they laugh, try that out in a larger setting. What you'll find is that it's actually humorous, and all it needs is a little bit of tweaking, and the laughs will start building and building and building as you refine it more and more. That's the same strategy that comedians use to build their routines and for their jokes. They say something and then they test it out, and then they refine it until it gets the level of laughter that they feel satisfied with. Now, one other thing that I would suggest with humor is be conscious of what you do on the fly. So, going back to 2016, I had a line that I used. Be honest, you enjoyed that, didn't you? That got a huge laugh, and it all happened because of a mistake in the club during one of my practices. So I was getting on stage, I was getting ready to practice that speech, but the mic was too low. So I had to try to adjust the mic on the stage, and I need to buy time after the title was read. People are just waiting in anticipation for me to say something, and I just said the first thing on my mind. Be honest, you enjoyed that, didn't you? While I'm setting up the mic, and they laughed. I'm like, oh, okay. So then I practiced that in another club and did the same thing, and they laughed again. I was like, okay, this is actually gold. So that's what I included in that speech, and it all came from a mistake. So there are times when you say something on the fly in a table topics, for instance. If you're in a table topics and you say something you didn't know it was going to be funny or not, people laugh. Take note of that, try it again, and see if it gets the same result. So I take more of the scientist approach. I don't try to force in a joke, force in humor. I don't really think that it's wise to try to force in the humor or try to find something funny. Sometimes the funny will just reveal itself, to be honest, in your natural conversations. All right. Any other questions from, oh, wow, we're already, geez, time flies. So one more question and then we'll close.
With respect to feedback filters, at my advanced club, every speaker, in addition to a written formal evaluation, gets a round robin evaluation. And what you rapidly find out is that not everybody agrees with every element all the time.
Yeah. And I think it kind of alludes to something that I think it was you who spoke about fitting your style. And again, feedback is great. Toastmasters is built on feedback, but all feedback is not necessarily for you. And some people's feedback, they're giving you that feedback based off of what they would do. However, they're not you. So you always have to think about, okay, I understand what you're saying, I understand where you're coming from, but sometimes it's just not me. And what you'll also find is that some people will agree with that, and then some people won't. Everybody has different opinions. So again, from what I said before, there is no such thing as the way. If there is a person that says, no, you must do it this exact way or it's not going to work, unless it's something scientific or mathematical, I say, psh. And you need to go away from that person who's giving you that feedback as fast as possible. It's all about finding what your way is, what is most comfortable for you, what fits you and your style. And that's honestly something that I will leave you with. If you take nothing else away, there is no such thing as the way. There is only a way. It is up to you to find your way. This process, hopefully you can take some aspects of it and apply it to your own processes. There may be some things in this list that you like. There may be some things that you don't like recording yourself. Take what you think will be useful for you and create your own processes. And I only ask that when you do that, and as you advance in your public speaking lives, if you get to the world stage, if you win the world championship of public speaking, promise me that you will teach other people your processes so that they can go out and create their own. Thank you so much, District 101. It has been an absolute pleasure.